those who come in the night. Jonathan Brooks never believed in mysticism. A rational and practical man, he lived in a small town in Montana surrounded by endless fields and dark forests. His days were calm and predictable until one night that changed everything. It happened on a Friday night. Jonathan sat on the porch of his house as usual, sipping hot coffee and watching the stars. The soft light of the moon illuminated his farm, and a light breeze whispered in the tree crowns. But on this night, something was wrong. There was a strange silence in the air, no sound of cicadas or owls. And then there was a sound, a low vibrating hum that seemed both distant and frighteningly close. Jonathan stood up, looking around, but he couldn't find the source of the sound. After a few moments the rumbling stopped, but it was replaced by a bright flash of light on the horizon. It wasn't an ordinary light. It was a shimmering green and blue light, like a living creature winking at him from afar. Jonathan didn't immediately realize what he was doing, but his legs carried him toward the old pickup truck. He drove down the country road, trying not to think about what was driving him forward. The light grew closer and brighter, and when Jonathan reached a cornfield, he stopped. He saw a sight he would never forget. In the center of the field hovered a huge object that looked like an inverted saucer. Its surface shimmered like mercury and emitted a strange glow. Around the object, the grass and corn were scorched black, as if someone had run a giant torch over them. Jonathan froze, unable to move, but that was not the worst of it. Figures began to emerge from the object. They were tall, thin, with long limbs and large heads. Their eyes, huge, black, devoid of emotion, stared straight at Jonathan. He wanted to run, to scream, but his body wouldn't listen. The figures approached him. One of the creatures raised a long finger, and at that moment Jonathan felt his consciousness being ripped from his body. Everything around him was engulfed in a blinding light. When he opened his eyes, he was already inside the ship. The walls around him pulsed with soft light, as if alive. He was lying on a table and the creatures were leaning over him. Jonathan could not move, but he felt an incredible heaviness in his chest, and a strange coldness that penetrated to his bones. The creatures made no sound, but Jonathan could hear their voices right in his head. They spoke in a strange, incomprehensible language, but somehow he understood them. They were studying him, like scientists investigating an unknown species. One of the figures held out a hand and everything was engulfed in light again. Jonathan woke up in the same cornfield. The ship was gone, and the sky was once again filled with stars. He looked around. The ground was still scorched, but there was no sign of the strange creatures. The only reminder of what had happened was the mark on his wrist, a circular scar that pulsed with a faint light in the darkness. He returned home, but sleep did not come. All the next day, Jonathan tried to convince himself that it was all a dream or a hallucination. However, the scar on his arm was too real to ignore. Weeks passed, but Jonathan could not shake the strange feeling that he was being watched. Every week, unexplained occurrences, encounters with aliens. The twilight road stretched into the distance, illuminated only by the dim headlights of an old pickup truck. Jason Williams, tired after a long shift at the factory, drove sleepily, glancing only occasionally at the passenger seat where his wife, Sarah, sat. Suddenly a silhouette appeared ahead, frozen in the middle of the road. Jason slammed on the brakes and the car skidded to a stop a few feet away from the strange creature. Sarah shrieked in surprise and Jason stared into the darkness, overcome with fear. It was a humanoid silhouette, about 2 meters tall, with a disproportionately large head and long, thin limbs. The creature turned slowly toward them, and Jason was horrified to see that it had no eyes, just 2 black, bottomless holes in its pale face. It made a shrill sound that sent a chill down Jason's spine. Unable to move, the couple sat mesmerized, staring at the creature. Suddenly, it took a step toward the car, and Jason overcame his daze and pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The car sped forward, leaving the alien silhouette behind, disappearing into the night. Jason's heart pounded frantically, and Sarah sobbed quietly, clinging to him. They raced away to get as far away from the creepy place as possible, but the strange creature was still in their minds, a chilling horror. After a few miles, Jason decided to stop to calm down. They pulled over to the side of the road and got out of the car, trying to recover from the shock. Suddenly, Sarah noticed that there was something on the hood of the car. As they got closer, they saw strange marks, as if left by clawed paws. They hurried back to the car and sped away without looking back. All the way home, Jason pounded on the gas, and Sarah huddled in the passenger seat, unable to say a word. When they got home, they locked the doors and windows, trembling, afraid that the creature might reappear. They did not sleep all night and jumped up every time they heard any suspicious sound. In the morning they decided to go to the police, but their account of the alien encounter was met with only skepticism and ridicule. Unable to find any explanation for what had happened, Jason and Sarah lived in constant fear, fearing that one day the creepy creature would reappear on their path. They became withdrawn and suspicious, avoiding traveling the roads at night. Their lives became a nightmare that never seemed to end. Years passed, but the memory of that terrible night haunted them, preventing them from living peacefully. They could never find an answer to the question, what had they really encountered on that deserted road? Who or what was that creepy creature? And would they be forced to face it again?